This week, we interviewed John Moran, Senior Product Manager at DFLabs, talk about the SOAR market. And I think it's really more about where the rubber meets the road and how you actually use a SOAR product in your environment to accomplish specific tasks that we're going to go through today. Super excited about that. In the enterprise security news, we've got Alert Logic even playing in the container security space. McAfee makes some announcements with their enterprise security portfolio. Threat Connect is messaging some updates on its playbooks as they're also playing in the SOAR market. Optiv launches a new managed security service on identity management. CA Technologies may now become part of Broadcom. All that and more on this episode even of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
I'm a tiger. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly. I don't know how this is going to go because Paul's not here this week, but we're just going to give it a shot.
Even if you've got experience in security, you can benefit from going to somewhere and learning about that bug again. Wearing my tactical turtleneck just for Mr. John Strand, who is on the lines via Skype. John, welcome to the program.
I'm wearing the tactical fleece as well, Paul. This is
Excellent.
A fully, completely, and utterly tactical show.
Are you an enterprise dissatisfied with overpriced analytics software that can't keep up with modern data? If so, then Gravwell is the solution for you. Gravwell is an unstructured data analytics platform for enterprises who demand total data visibility across their network. Gravwell lets your security team go beyond the SIM and fuse data sources to correlate and answer questions you didn't know needed to be asked. Go to gravwell.io/securityweekly for an unlimited data trial and gain uncompromising visibility today. Improve the efficiency and effectiveness of your security operations with DFLabs security orchestration, automation, and response technology. Automate threat containment, orchestrate incident response, and measure operational performance with DFLabs Incman SOAR platform. Leverage your current security resources to minimize incident resolution time, maximize analyst efficiency, increase the number of incidents handled, and reduce overall risk. Incman SOAR acts as a force multiplier, enabling your security team to do more with less. Streamline the full incident response lifecycle automation process today. Keep your cybersecurity incidents under control with DFLabs. Visit dflabs.com/securityweekly and request to see Incman SOAR live in action. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/ESW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Stop attackers from domain credential theft and lateral movement with a 99% success rate by using artificial intelligence to control the attacker's perception of the environment. Javelin Networks is the world's first endpoint intrusion containment platform to protect domain networks. Javelin detects targeted attacks and breaches by obfuscating Active Directory, domain controllers, domain identities, domain credentials, and all domain resources. It only takes one compromised machine to jeopardize the entire organization. Don't be a victim. Visit javelin-networks.com and request a demo of AD Protect today. Are you worried about PCI compliance? Does your development team understand or care about security? Are you ready to face a breach of your customer's sensitive data? See the worst that can happen before it does. Black Hills Information Security can help you help management see the future. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a web application penetration test can mitigate the risk before you go live. Welcome everyone to Enterprise Security Weekly, episode 99 for July 18th. 2018. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, of course, broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios here in Rhode Island. I'm here with John Moran or Moore. Does it matter? Moran? It is Moran. Okay.
Either way, I've been called worse, but yeah, Moran.
I'm sure. And that's just not nice, because John's a really nice guy, and we're happy to have John here in studio. Welcome back to the show. Yep. You've been in this show before, right?
I have.
Yeah.
Second time on this show. Yep.
That's awesome, dude. I'm excited about our conversation today. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to show some screenshots and walk through what DFLabs and your Incman product calls Runbooks, but generically talk about like what does it mean to implement this whole process called SOAR, and how does it integrate into your environment? I get a lot of questions about that, and then I kind of flip the tables on people and I talk about it when we're talking about other things. So we'll run through all of that. I want to remind our listeners to make sure you take our 2018 listener survey. Please go to securityweekly.com/survey. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes to run through the survey. It collects valuable feedback anonymously about your listening habits, a little bit about the general kind of demographics of our audience, helps us match sponsors to our programming, and helps us shape our programming moving forward so we have the best content for you, the listeners. So please help us out. Go to securityweekly.com/survey. Take 10 minutes of your time to fill it out. It is immensely useful for us and for you. Imagine that. It's a win-win for everyone. So what else we got for announcements? Oh, we'll be at Black Hat and DEF CON in the pool area in the respective resorts. Make sure you come see us. We've got Cyber Hero Adventures comic book that we are I believe, the exclusive distributor, at least for this copy, which has a little bit about Security Weekly on the inside cover. You'll notice one of our sponsors, I believe, is going to be in the other part of the book. Gary Berman's going to be there. He's the creator of this comic to help basically raise awareness about cybersecurity issues for folks. So if you got friends, family, coworkers that you're looking for new and innovative ways to raise awareness about security issues, this I thought was a great way to do it. So we're working with Gary, and it's just really cool to have cool comic book about what we do in security. They're based on real world experiences, including Gary's, which is an interesting story. You can hear Gary's interview on Paul's Security Weekly that we did a few episodes ago. Also, in the pool area, we'll be doing Hacker Movie Trivia. We'll be doing some analyst briefings. We're going to try and record some shows at our DEF CON 1. We'll also have presence in the DEF CON vendor area where we'll be selling stuff, including some cool... Yeah, I just gave you a set of those computer glasses. Yeah. Those will actually be on sale. Shot glasses, of course, our Hack Naked t-shirts. So, yeah, come check us out at the event. Looking forward to seeing everyone. And now we're going to talk about SOAR. Now, John, you gave me the full product demo, which was awesome. You guys have a very highly customizable, awesome product. But what really resonated with me in terms of being able to speak about security, orchestration, automation, and response at a higher level was the actual details of like what's in these run books and playbooks that everyone's talking about. And more importantly, like, how does that help me? So you've got some examples that I just wanted to run through, a few of them, and talk about some of those integrations and things that you can do to basically make your lives easier, right? I mean, I don't know your experience, but John Stren and I were talking a few episodes ago about how there's like a ninja or expert in a lot of companies today, an expert in security, right? They're really busy, and a lot of these experts have been in IT before there was IT security for 20, 30 years, so they're applying their expertise to various things. But what I find these folks need is, how do I get my level 1 SOC or my help desk engaged in this process so that I don't have to do everything? And I think this is really certainly one of those answers.
Yeah, that's absolutely one of the benefits of using a SOAR technology. It's, we call that kind of the tribal knowledge in an organization. It's that knowledge that your senior level guys have, and
or gals, let's be fair.
Or gals, that your senior level people have, and it's not easy always to communicate that to people, especially with the amount of turnover and things like that you tend to experience in a SOC environment. So having a flexible tool like a SOAR solution in place allows you to codify those more complex security processes into a workflow that one it enables a security team to do those processes faster, but also helps those junior level analysts learn. They can look at the workflows, they can look at what's taking place, and it allows them to kind of take in that knowledge while, without slowing down the process, right?
Sure. The other benefit too, I think, is it raises the value of your other security investments, right? So you may have invested in some threat intelligence feeds, you may have invested in a SIM platform, in an endpoint platform, you've got next-gen firewalls, air quotes as we call them, right? But you've got things that can block stuff in your network. and you've got a ticketing system and some processes. Well, how do you tie all those things together, short of like going and writing all these custom scripts that are interfacing with everyone's API? I thought that when this started emerging on the market, it was a huge win to help organizations recognize and get more value out of their investments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I experienced when I was doing incident response was that sort of fragmentation of all your different tools, right? So you've got your EDR tool, you've got your IDS or your network tool, and it takes a lot of manual time to bring all that information together. Even if you're scripting things, which takes time to write the scripts, it takes time to bring all that stuff together. And quite frankly, that's wasted time with the amount of work that we all have as analysts and as security engineers. That's stuff that you don't need to spend time doing. Those are mundane tasks, and you're wasting your time doing that.
Right.
You're tying up your security analysts, doing those sort of that bringing all that information together manually when you can use a tool to do that for you.
Absolutely. So let's start with one of the runbooks that you have. You share your screen. Probably have to zoom in quite a bit, and want to start at the farmost left, which is, and so when we look at the farmost left, this is really about data collection, right, and some correlation, right? So are we taking an input first in this one? So like, what does this one do, and where do we start?
It is. So the way most of we call runbooks, some people refer to them as playbooks, workflows. What they do is they start out with one or more inputs, and that can depend very much. They can be variable depending on the incident. So for a network type intrusion, you may have a source destination IP, you may have a host name, whereas on your endpoints you may have inputs like file names, hash values, things like that. So the inputs can be variable depending on the individual runbook, and the purpose is really to start by enriching that information. So you start out an investigation, you maybe have these two little pieces of information, and now I want to know more. That's always the first step that an analyst has to do normally manually, is go, what is this IP address? How can I tie this into other sources of information? Yeah,
you get that first little breadcrumb, and you gotta follow the trail. And I think those of us that have been
from there.
Yeah, and doing that analysis in an organization, you end up with that. Like that first, it's not even really. It's like a piece of an indicator. Right? It's like that first little. So what are we starting with here in this one? I don't know if you can zoom in.
I will. Yeah, okay. I just kind of wanted to show the overall flow, so you can see it kind of goes left to right, and so we'll zoom in here a little bit, and we'll see on the very right hand side. Yeah.
There you go.
There we go. Zoom in this way here. So we start out here, and this is actually a runbook that is going to handle like an endpoint detection. So whether it's through Carbon Black or antivirus, something like that, it's a malicious process. So the only input here we really need is the host name it was detected from, and in this case we're going to use a hash value.
So I've got endpoint protection, some level of endpoint protection on my endpoints, right? It has discovered some type of event, a malicious process in this case. However, it's discovered that, right? That could be heuristics, its own machine learning that's in the cloud, through some threat intelligence feed that they're connected to, some combination thereof, right?
Exactly.
My endpoint has found that this host is running a malicious process.
Exactly, and that's really the beauty of SOAR, is that we're able to ingest information from so many different sources. It doesn't matter. We're not dependent on, okay, well, you have to be using Tanium for this. So you know, we can ingest that information. We can parse it, whether it's through syslog or through an API. That information can come in, and we can use the other tools you have in your organization or cloud solutions that you have to then take that information and build out from there. So in this case, you can see each one of these different nodes we have are actually different actions that we're going to take, and obviously there's different flow controls.
And so, what data are you getting in that first one? When you're taking data from your endpoint solution, you're getting the host name that was potentially infected. And you're getting a hash value or an IP address or domain associated with the malware it's running?
You could, and it's going to depend very much on the endpoint tool that you're getting the information from, right? Some have very verbose logs, and we can enrich a lot of that information. Others are very limited, but the nice thing about it is that we can set up custom parsers to parse out the information, the bits and pieces. So as long as we know what you're going to get, you can take that and utilize as much of it as possible. But we're not dependent on, okay, for an endpoint alert, you have to get these 5 pieces of information.
Sure.
That's completely customizable, and we can work with whatever you have.
Yeah.
And we're not.
So what are you
relying on
taking
what you
in
don't
parsing in this one?
So in here, we're just taking in I believe a hash value and a host name.
Okay.
And that's
so the host that was
gonna
infected and a hash value of the malicious process that was running.
Yeah, and obviously you could do a lot more, and these are, just kind of for simplicity and time, these are fairly simple runbooks, just show off some of the different integrations and the different kinds of things you can do. But we'll talk about ways throughout as we kind of move through here in these different runbooks, ways you could certainly enhance it or different things. That's the beauty of these, is that it's going to be different for every organization. I'm not here to tell you this is the right way to build a runbook.
Yeah, this is just, I think people need to, kind of get a feel for an example of what it looks like. So, so we know that we've got a hash value of a malicious process and a host name. So now what are you going to do with that information?
Yeah, so in this case, we're actually going to go, I believe in this case, we're simulating something from an alert from Carbon Black in this particular instance. So the first thing we're going to do is just go out and do a simple virus total query. Say, what does virus total say about this hash value?
Yeah.
Yep, and we're going to take
so we're going to cross-reference that.
We're going to take that information back. I'm always a fan of kind of trust but verify. So one tool says this is malicious. Let's see what another tool has to say. I mean, there's all kinds of different tools out there. We have integrations with a number of threat intelligence or threat data tools, but we're using virus total in this case. And the next thing we're going to do after we get that information back from virus total is we reach our first decision point. And in this case, the runbook's going to look and see what did Carbon Black say about it, what did virus total say about it, and what was the overall threat score. Now, this is completely customizable. In this case, we've got, we can see here we have a couple different conditions. We're looking at the Carbon Black severity or the number of virus total results that came back. But
that's nice, because now you're bringing that to a human with that information they need to make a decision, right? So, and you can validate this any way you want. You can say, when my endpoint throws an alert, go off to, maybe I have a custom threat feed for my industry, like an FSISAC or whatever, right? And then bring that to an analyst and be like, all right, here's what I know so far. And they're verifying that.
Exactly. They can. So there's actually 2 different ways we can make a decision here, specifically in Incman. One is an automated decision, which in this case is what we're using here. And the other way is what we call
if the threat score is above an 8.
A user choice decision.
Yeah,
right.
Like, don't even put it past the user, just automatically take an action. Right. But if it's between this threat score, bring it to a human. Anything less than that, you're ignoring.
Right.
And that threat score is something that the user can calculate in a lot of these tools.
Absolutely.
Like based on your sources, right?
Yep.
Okay.
You can create different basically and or rules. So if this threat score is this or higher, or this is this.
So if
you can kind of do automated flow control.
In each feed I'm taking in, like if it's this severity in this check and it's this severity in this check, then that means...
Right, exactly. Then we can say, yeah, it's more than likely malicious. Let's, in some cases you might want to take containment on that, or you might want to do further enrichment. Right. Now, the other option is to bring that to an analyst, and that's what we call a user choice decision. And basically what that does is...
And that's what you've done here, right? Like, my endpoint's basically saying you got an issue. Virus total said, yeah, it's definitely a thing. Bring that to an analyst.
Right. Yeah. And so in this case, this is actually a fully automated runbook.
Okay.
So there's no user choice decisions in here. We're going to do this workflow completely automated. So this alert comes in. This runbook is automatically executed, and it's going to run from start to finish based on the predefined decisions or conditions that somebody has already decided are appropriate for the organization.
Right. So it's hit threshold. So what's the third box there?
So if we hit that threshold, now the user choice would do exactly what you're talking about, where it would pause the runbook. They could come in and look at the results from virus total and then say, do I want to take path A or path B?
And I can see the senior people in the organizations going, well, I want everyone to come through me first, and then after there's a certain level of confidence and trust built, them flipping that into an automated. Is that typically how you see it?
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. I mean, automation, I think, scares some people because they see it as an all or nothing thing. We need to release total control, and that's not the way we recommend doing it, right? You're just looking for trouble at that point. So you want to automate the decisions that are predictable, automate the decisions that are easy and repeatable, and then allow the human to come in when it makes sense. So especially when you start talking about doing containment actions, banning a hash, banning an IP address, isolating a host, right? A lot of organizations aren't comfortable handing that totally over to an automated decision. They want some sort of user check-in there, and that's what we enable through those the user choice decisions that we have. So in this case, we look at virus total, and if it comes back as being potentially malicious, we already talked about having carbon black in the environment, so we're going to go back out to carbon black, and I want all the information about that binary. Now, we're not going to make a decision on this, but this is just information for the analyst when they come in. So we all know, I think probably everybody's had some exposure to carbon black and the rich amount of information that stores. It's going to go pull all the information back on that binary so the analyst can come in and look at things and make more informed decisions when they start looking at doing containment and eradication type actions. The next thing we're going to do is reach out to McAfee EPO to get some host information. Right? So I know what the binary is now. I've got some information on that. What host is this running on? And that's something that an analyst was going to do. Right. You know, is this a workstation? Is this a server? Is this in my facilities group, or is this in my finance group? Right. That's going to make a big difference on how I decide to. You're
basically giving information to help set the severity level of the incident. Exactly. And now we're not just pulling from our security tools, but our inventory tools. Right. I've seen ServiceNow have similar kind of like, tell me about this host. Like, what is it?
Exactly.
And I think you can also put like a severity level based on what it is, right? Like in your EPO or ServiceNow or whatever, you can say like, these are more critical assets than these, and then build that into your workflow. So when it pulls out, you know that it's either really critical or not based on what you've defined.
Yep. Yeah, you absolutely can, and we can update things like priorities, incident priorities. We can send notifications automatically through Runbooks as well. So if it does come back through EPO as a priority host or maybe a domain controller, however you tag your assets, we can actually send notifications out so that not only is it in the incident, but there's emails and alerts going out saying, hey, this is
awesome, because
this is a problem.
It's like the top question. Like once you've kind of started digging into an incident, like even on your own internal network, you're like, what is that? Right. And like, could that be a false positive? Like, is it a Windows-based malware alert that's coming off of is it a Linux host? Like stuff like that, you can start to uncover it. And then also you're like, well, like where is it in my value chain for my business? What is this device? And that's awesome that we're building that right into the system. Yeah.
At this point, it's all just about building that context. It's about taking that initial alert and trying to add, enriched information to that to make better decisions on how to respond to the incident from there. So after we query EPO, we're going to reach another decision point, and this decision point is just looking to see whether this is, in this case, tagged as a server. So in our imaginary organization, we just tag things as servers. We want to know, is this a server or not, because we want to know how safe it might be to ban a process. Now, in this case, an organization might be more likely to use a user choice decision before banning a hash, but for the sake of demo purposes, we've made it just an automated decision. So this automated decision is going to say, is this a server? And if it is, we're going to send out a notification that says, hey, we've detected this malicious process on a server, and we're going to move on from there. If it's determined to be not a server, so in this case perhaps a workstation, we're going to use Carbon Black to go out and automatically ban that hash and stop that from executing across the environment. Now, we've already done some checks to see how malicious the host is, so we're fairly sure it's malicious. And we've determined that based on the fact that it's not a server, we're pretty confident that we can ban that without hopefully too much hate and discontent. So we'll go ahead and execute that. Now, again, totally based on the comfort level of the organization, but that is an option. And then we reach another decision point, and here now we're going to look to see just briefly if there were any network connections from Carbon Black. So when we query that Carbon Black data, it's going to give us information about how many network connections there were. If it's greater than 0, we're going to take this path here, and we're actually going to go back out to Carbon Black and look at the IP addresses. So if that process was communicating with any IPs, who was it communicating with? Let's pull all that information back, and then we're going to go query that through an IP reputation service to see which ones, if any, are potentially malicious. Now, again, this is all stuff that, you know...
So now you're reaching out to another set of intelligence feeds of some kind.
Yeah. So again, we're taking that hash, and again, now we're pivoting off of that to look at network connections. And this is all stuff that as an analyst, you probably do manually every day, but you do it manually. I know I did it, and you know, some of it was scripted, but you know, then you look at, okay, we've got to go through the information that was returned in the script, and we've got to manually correlate it and everything. We can do that, and so now we've got the network connections. We've gone out, grabbed the IP reputation, and now we're going to iterate over each one of those IPs and their reputation that was returned, and through this decision tree, we're going to say, do that IP reputation match a certain threshold? And if it does, now let's block that IP address.
So you can reach out to your firewall.
In this case, I think we're using integration with Palo Alto, I believe. But yeah, any of the firewall or network detection or prevention technologies that you have in your environment, we can go out and block that IP address.
What I like too is now you're expanding the scope outside of your endpoints. So let's say that you haven't covered 100% of your environment with your endpoint protection suite. Now in this process, your endpoints that are being protected have given you intelligence, and by blocking on the firewall, you're blocking any potential future infections that may get around or circumvent your endpoint, or just be on a system that doesn't have that protection on it yet.
Exactly.
Or someone's disabled that. I mean, there's a million different scenarios.
Yep, exactly. And you know, when we talk about you know, other ways that we could really, you know, branch this runbook out even more, you know, we start with a hash value. We're looking at that individual host. You could certainly extend this runbook to look at Carbon Black and see if any other hosts have executed this particular process, and pivot out from there. I mean, you can see how this, you know, just like a normal investigation, right? It's going to grow outwards quite a bit, and that's all. You know, these are very scalable, so you could go out and look for those other endpoints and maybe running those processes. Look at what they're connecting to. I mean, whatever your process is, it can be codified. And what I like too
in this scenario, and I more closely attach this to email, but even in this scenario, if it's a domain name, our other sponsored domain tools, can tell you that the same threat actors have registered not just that domain name, but these other 50 domain names. You could integrate that in there and say, well, when you find a domain name, go get more intelligence about similar domains, and don't just block that one, but block all 50.
Exactly.
And now any future phishing attempts or malware campaigns are going to be blocked automatically.
Yep, exactly. And we do have another use case. I don't have it up here today. The next one I've got is a network-based one, but specifically surrounding phishing and some of the cool things we can do with that, like extracting domains and IP addresses and getting that intelligence. We can we have integrations with you know, Exchange and Office 365.
Yeah, because the other popular thing that I like too in the email side of things is if it's email borne, you can say, well, I found it, I verified it, I've identified, you know, where it was infected. Oh, by the way, now take this and go pull it from everyone else's inbox before they even open it.
Exactly.
Right? Even if you have endpoint protection, I'm like, I'd probably still go do that, right? Like, I don't even want them to try and open it.
Yep. Yeah, we can go out and search inboxes. We can quarantine or delete those messages. We have integrations with sandbox technology, so you can actually pull that attachment right out. If let's say it looks like a phishing email, and somebody just forwards it to you, right? Maybe you don't have an email scanning engine in place, but somebody, you've trained your users well, hey, send this, you know, any suspected phishing email, send it to this email address. We can ingest that right from that email address and start processing it to determine if it does look like it's malicious. And that can include even including attachments, pulling those out, shipping them off to your sandbox, executing them, making decisions based on the information from your sandbox. So, you know, I mean, it's really...
Yeah, because there's different verification based on the type of attachment too. Like, is it a document, is it a PDF versus a Word document versus some other kind of malicious attachment, right? You might take different actions depending on what it is.
Exactly, and that's why the different integrations are so important. And I mean, really, you could sit here all day and posit different things you could do with a SOAR technology. There's just so many different scenarios. You're really only kind of limited by your imagination. I just kind of picked a couple of I think the more popular ones, that probably the alerts that SOCs are struggling with in terms of volume and the amount of time it takes to enrich that information. But phishing is another very common use case that we talk about.
And, you know, also we want to make sure we document our processes too, And so what I've seen here and with other products too, right, is you can tie that into your ticketing and tracking system. So there's a log of what happened.
Yep. Yeah, in our case, everything within Incman is logged. So all of the enriched information that comes back is all logged, and not only is it stored within the runbook, but it's permanently attached to that particular artifact. Yep. So
and you can link into a ticketing system and automatically file a ticket to
exactly.
say, hey, we found this, we ran through this whole thing, like here's everything that happened. Tickets filed.
Yep.
Someone can
exactly.
Take a look
we
at
support the major ITSM platforms.
Yep.
So if your let's say your infrastructure team is going to be the ones actually responsible for going out and re-imaging that workstation, things like that. You can even automate the creation of tickets. You can add notes to tickets, update priorities, all that stuff right from within a runbook. So you can even decide whether or not to create a ticket.
You're automating the remediation. I mean, that's the response piece, right? Is you're automatically filing a ticket to say, okay, like we blocked all this stuff, but something was indicative in this case where you want to file a ticket for your infrastructure team to go re-image a server or a desktop or whatever it is. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yep.
I struggle with that at the university, is that remediation step, right? Because it requires more process and more people taking action, and the more you can automate, the better.
Yep. Yeah. It's we like to enable collaboration wherever we can. So whether it's through collaborating internally within Incman, being able to share information that way, or collaboration with external teams, right? Because we know the security team doesn't exist in a bubble.
Yeah.
So being able to do those notifications, interacting with those ticketing systems, sharing information where appropriate outside of Incman is something we try to enable whenever we can, because it does help out quite a bit.
That's awesome.
So the second one we have here is actually based on a network detection. So we've done the endpoint. Now we're going to look at a network detection, and this is just simply one of those alerts that you get 12 times a minute. Hey, this internal host is contacting this external host, and we've got some sort of intelligence somewhere that says maybe this external IP address is a bad one.
Right.
So how do you start triaging those? Well, let's go ahead and zoom in here a little bit. And the first thing we're going to do, just like we did before, is go through some basic enrichment information, right? So we're going to do a geolocation on the IP address, get the whois information, do a reverse IP, and then here again, I use virus total because it's free and everybody has access to it. We're going to use that virus total IP reputation to see, is this potentially malicious? Now, a lot of times we'll include two different sources. I did in this case, but maybe you run that through Threat Connect as well, trust but verify. And we're going to grab that information, and we're going to see if virus total tags that as malicious. Now, again, the particular threshold that you use for determining what's bad and what isn't, totally customizable. But in this case, we're going to go out and we're going to grab that information, and we're going to use one of our containment actions with one of our firewalls to block that IP address if we determine that it's bad. The next thing we're going to do is actually go and get file reputations based on the information returned from virus total. So we're going to look at when you run an IP address through virus total, it's going to give you the MD5s of the samples that it's seen communicating with that IP address.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we're going to go out
in reverse now,
exactly,
right?
Yeah. So now we're taking the IP and we're pivoting out. We're going to see what MD5 values has this IP address have been communicating with this IP address. And let's get the information on those. Let's see what those are. How bad are those? And in this case, this is just kind of for analyst information. But you could certainly make decisions. Yeah,
then you can go back out to your endpoint.
Go back out to your SIM and look for your EDR tool, whatever you have in place, and look for evidence of execution of those hash values to identify other hosts, things like that. So really, again, limitless potentials. But and then the last thing we do before we reach another decision tree is we're going to get the system info again from EPO, and again, that's just to see is this a server, is this a workstation again, right, or whatever your particular criteria is. But basically, what we're determining here at this next decision point is based on what EPO has told us. Again, do we feel safe doing a little bit more automated activity, or should we maybe hold back a little bit and let an analyst make that decision? So in this case, if maybe we're not comfortable with that, we're just going to go back out and tag the host in EPO as infected or malware or whatever you're using for tags. if we do feel comfortable taking some action, in this case, we're going to tag the host. But the next thing we're going to do is actually use our Active Directory integration to go out and get the user information for that PC. So, you know, what user was online when this malicious communication was taking place on this host. We're going to generate a new password, a random password, in this case just using Python script to generate a 16-character password, and then use our Active Directory integration to set a new password. So take that, put it back into Active Directory to change the user's password and require password reset the next time they log in. And the very last thing we're going to do is use one of our notification actions to email the user. So we've pulled the email address out of Active Directory. Now we're going to email the user. We're going to take that temporary password in, and we're going to send all that to the user to say, hey, you know, your account may be compromised. We've reset your password. Here's your temporary password. All that stuff takes the service desk right out of it. They don't have to deal with resetting the user password.
And you could include the help desk in there if you wanted to.
Oh, absolutely.
Process, right?
Yeah,
you could just change the user's password, file a ticket.
Exactly. You could file
or maybe
tickets.
not change the user's password and just have a list for the help desk that says, hey, like, if these people call in, we've noticed some suspicious behavior. If they're calling in, you might want to reset their password for them. But you get to set the level and have the corresponding actions be either automated or have some a user involved. That's really cool.
Exactly. You could CC the help desk on that email so they know that the user's password's been changed. But it's really just kind of about showing the flexibility and the options here of things that you can do. And I think actually being able to automate that password change, you know, you don't have to create a ticket that's going to go out and it's going to take the help desk, you know, 3 or 4 hours before they see that low priority ticket to change a password. Let's just go ahead and change the password. We'll tell the user about it, and then all that information will be available to the analyst as well. So.
Cool. And did you have one more?
I do have one more. We'll go over real quick. And this one I wanted to share because it's kind of it's an interesting use case. It's something a little bit different that you may not think of SOAR addressing, but it's something I've been playing with and I thought was kind of a cool idea. It actually came to us from one of our channel partners who said, hey, you know, we've got some customers struggling with vulnerability management. And my first thought was, well, we're not a vulnerability management platform. That's not what we do, and we're just not built for that, right? But they said, well, you know, no, but our customers are having issues with communication between the security team and maybe the people who are doing the scanning and the patching and things like that.
Very common.
And the security teams don't even know that these vulnerabilities exist in the organization. So I said, okay, maybe that we can do something with, right? So so that's what we're doing here. We're taking in this case, scan results, so an alert based on a new vulnerability that was detected. And the first thing we're going to do is just do a search on that CV, go out, pull off information online so the security team knows as much as they can about that particular vulnerability that was found. We're going to do things like we'll email in this case, we've set up a vulnerability group so everybody's aware of that particular vulnerability. And we're going to do stuff like go out and search Active Directory for that host, search EPO for that host. We're also going to look at Carbon Black. And in this case, we're going to do a little bit more advanced query in Carbon Black. We're going to look for any processes that have executed that are known to be vulnerable, so in the NVD database in this case, and have network connections. So is there anything out there that's vulnerable and may have network connections?
Gotcha. And
the last thing we do here is we create a ticket just to notify the help desk that this vulnerability exists so they can do what they do on their end. Now, we're going to look at that information that comes back, and we're going to say, you know, what's the severity of this? You know, what was the host information? So again, you know, server, workstation, finance, that sort of thing. And
that's one of the keys to vulnerability management is understanding the severity as defined by the vulnerability, and then cross-referencing that with what host is affected by their service or process or application, and what's the severity of that to the business.
Exactly.
And it's bringing those two together that is one of the challenges, probably top challenges in vulnerability management and understanding what vulnerabilities you have to be responding to over others and having that priority.
Exactly. And our goal here really is to inform the security team and make sure that, you know, the security of the organization isn't compromised while the vulnerability management process is taking place, right? You know, I know you guys have talked in depth on multiple episodes about different ways to manage vulnerabilities and things like that, and that's not what we do. We're here to enable the security process, and so that's what we're trying to achieve through this runbook. So we're going to look at all that information. We're going to decide based on the organization's threshold, should we do more with this, or are we comfortable just leaving the whoever's going to patch that to their devices. If it is kind of an elevated vulnerability, we'll update the status of that. We're going to email the vulnerability group again, and then we're going to go look at our SIM for evidence of execution of any vulnerable processes or any alerts in the event logs, things like that. Any information that may indicate that this has been exploited. Right? Pull that information back. And now the very last thing that we're going to do is actually, remember I talked about pulling back the network connection information as well. We're going to look at the vulnerability. We're going to look to see whether it is flagged as network exploitable, so remotely exploitable, whether there were any vulnerable processes running, and whether they had any network connections. And if all three of those criteria match, we're going to go ahead and isolate that host. Now, it's a remotely exploitable vulnerability with a vulnerable process making network connections.
Yep.
We need to take immediate action until somebody can actually go in and verify this.
And that's an advanced vulnerability management thing, which is awesome. I think even before that, what a lot of teams struggle with is, okay, there's a vulnerability. Let's determine how bad it is in terms of the vulnerability and which systems are affected to basically identify our own severity level. The next challenge is, okay, who do I tell about that vulnerability so they can fix it, right? And this allows you to build that workflow to say, when you find vulnerabilities of these types on these types of systems, that means that's a higher priority. And by the way, based on what EPO or ServiceNow or whoever is telling you about that host, here's the owner of that host that can fix the problem. File the ticket for them.
Exactly.
That is the most difficult thing to do in vulnerability management, is to tie all that stuff together, and that's some of the things that SOAR can help you build.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's awesome. I loved those three examples. I think it addresses so many of the challenges that both you and I have experienced in our own careers, right? Like, we're probably both you're sitting here like I am going, wish I had this when I was doing,
exactly.
All the stuff in the trenches and in operations, because these are the things that we're still struggling with today, that this type of technology can help you with. And I think it's interesting, when folks ask me about, what do I do with endpoint protection, what do I do about threat intelligence, and what do I do about vulnerability management, a huge thing that can help organizations today is implementing these types of processes and tying that stuff together.
It is. We had kind of a gap in tools for a while, and so new tools have come out, and okay, we need to address this. We need to, all these different gaps that we've been trying to fill, and now we're kind of at the point where we've got so many tools that all do something very well.
Right.
But there's so many tools in the environment, it's a bit overwhelming for the analysts.
And not just security
to be able to
either, right? Like,
those.
we're talking about help desk systems, we're talking about inventory management systems, and
exactly.
all those integrations are important.
Yep. We've even had use cases where people have implemented some physical security processes in here, as far as sending notifications and things like that, receiving, say, an automated alert, and sending out notifications, making decisions, things like that on physical security issues. So really, it's hard to pick just a few use cases to talk about, because pretty much anything that you experience in the SOC on a daily basis, you can automate to at least some level in a SOAR platform.
Awesome. John, thank you so much. I thought that was awesome information for our audience to help understand how these technologies can come together and help you. So with that, we're going to take a short break, come back, talk about the enterprise security news for this week. Stay tuned.